we are live again. This is part 3 in my How to Navigate Pain series. Today we are talking about the shoulder. If you have any questions or anything specific that you want me to cover, please go ahead and drop it. My lovely wife Tova will relay it to me. I have a new microphone. Please let me know if there's anything going on with the sound. We are going to get moving. All right, how to navigate shoulder pain. Now, with this specific series, I've been talking about, yes, assessment and treatment of it, but more importantly, how to modify in the moment if you are dealing with a bout of pain. So let's talk about the shoulder a little bit. With the shoulder, we have a lot of range of motion, right? We have a ton of range of motion going on. Dr. Arnika is coming in right now. We have a lot of range of motion in the shoulder. From left to right, we want to make sure that we have very similar ranges in our shoulders, right? So when we're looking at, say you have pain in the right side, we do want to assess bilaterally, meaning we want to assess both sides. And our shoulders tend to be very similar to the hips. So if you caught my live a couple of weeks ago, come on in, Doc, it's okay. If you caught my live a couple of weeks ago, you heard me talking about how important it is to assess the hips specifically when dealing with the low back and everything. When we're talking about the shoulders, we also want to talk about the upper back. So if you are experiencing pain in a shoulder or even in your elbows or your wrists, we want to make sure that we definitely go in there and assess shoulder range of motion. Now, what is the shoulder capable of? A whole bunch of different ranges. So we have shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, shoulder abduction. We have internal rotation, external rotation, circumduction. We have a whole bunch of stuff that the shoulder is capable of doing. Most importantly, we want to make sure that they are very similar from left to right and that you can comfortably get into those ranges of motion without load if you are trying to get into them with load. So if you are trying to accomplish a press or a push press or a push jerk, we want to make sure that you can already and passively get, or actively and passively meaning you'd be laying down on your back and you can just flop your arms down, actively meaning that you can just raise your arms up. We want to make sure that you can get there without too much effort and certainly without pain. If you are lacking that range of motion already before you're even loaded, but then you try to load yourself, you're going to be exposing yourself to either frustration because you can't barely get there, or pain and injury because you're forcing your body into a range or somewhere where it just does not feel like it can go safely. Okay, so we want to make sure that we really try to assess for that first. Okay, so shoulder range of motion. Also, the thoracic spine, your upper back, has everything to do with your ability to reach your arms overhead. And that's generally what we're talking about with shoulder range of motion when we're dealing in the CrossFit space or lifting. We tend to be pretty safe in this range, but when we go overhead, we start exposing the shoulder to a little bit more trauma. So we want to make sure that that's easy. So the upper back, you have to be sure that you don't just stay in this rounded position. Do you have the ability to extend that thoracic spine, which is your upper back? Or are you compensating by arching the lower back too much? Or does your thoracic spine stay muted, stay incapable of extending? And are you struggling to get your arms overhead because you just don't have that extra range in the upper back? Okay, so we're definitely looking at that. We're also looking at the ability for your shoulder blades to upwardly and downwardly rotate. Okay, if your shoulder blades or even your collarbone does not move along with your shoulder, then that could limit your range of motion and your ability to get into these ranges, into these positions under load. Okay, now I will say, if you are lacking in the ability to reach your arms completely overhead with ease, with comfort, then I encourage you to take away the barbell for a little bit. Don't force yourself into that range, and to think about the other overhead positions that you are forcing yourself into, i.e. mainly hanging from the bar. Okay, so that would be toes to bar, pull-ups, kipping pull-ups, bar muscle-ups, anything that forces you into this fully shoulder flexed position If you cannot do that comfortably and with ease on your own, I encourage you to try to limit your exposure to that until that becomes a range of motion that you have easily, okay? We're talking about limiting frustration and pain in the gym. If you keep forcing yourself into those ranges that you don't have, it's almost a guarantee for injury. All right, so how do we modify if we are currently experiencing a bout of pain? Say you have a history of shoulder injury and you're like, man, I just pissed it off the other day doing too many pull-ups, or I tweaked it, I slept on it bad. Whatever the case may be, one of the easiest ways to modify for good shoulder range of motion is sticking with a neutral grip. Okay, so when you have an overhand grip, you're automatically already forcing the shoulder into a slightly more compressed position. If you open up and give yourself that neutral grip, you're now relaxing the shoulder a little bit. It's not as stressed out. And so if you look with an overhead press, as I go to reach overhead, I'm really compressing that shoulder a little bit more there, okay? I can get there safely and comfortably because I'm not in pain right now. If I wanted to bring down that level of irritation, I can just keep a neutral grip, bring my palms to face each other, and then when I go overhead, you'll see that my shoulders are just a slightly more relaxed. It's not as stressed out as with this overhand grip, okay? So that's one of the easiest ways to adjust your programming in the moment. Test it out. See if you can now accomplish that range of motion without pain or with minimal irritation. Okay, that's one of the easiest ways to swap things out. You can also do this for pull-ups. Right? We have the neutral grip position. The rings are really good for this as well. If you have strict pull-ups in your programming and staying in that pronator, that overhand grip is just a little too stressful, you can use the neutral grip or you can use the rings for pull-ups and allow that shoulder to kind of go into the ranges of motion that are more comfortable, that feel stronger to it. Okay? So that's one way to modify in the moment. Another thing that you can do is maybe just take away the pull-up, take away the barbell. Sometimes what you're lacking is range of motion or control on one side, while the other side might feel okay. If you use the barbell, you're forcing that other arm to get into a range of motion that maybe it doesn't want to go to. So what you can do is modify with the dumbbells. Say you have thrusters. You do your thruster, maybe you end up in this position, or you end up in this position, okay? You're allowing a little bit more independent movement from left to right, therefore not forcing that injured or that troublesome side to get into a range that it doesn't want to go into, okay? So dumbbells or a neutral grip are one of the easiest ways to modify in the moment. The other thing that you can do, and of course we've talked about this in other lives, is limit the range of motion. So say you have overhead pressing. Maybe you don't want to get to that full overhead position. You can do an incline press, you can do a bench press, you can do a landmine press, and just stick to a range of motion that you have comfortably and that is pain-free, okay? You can also obviously decrease the load. And if we're talking about the shoulder, we're definitely talking about modifying for pull-ups. They don't necessarily need to go to a ring row. I know that's usually the common modification for pull-ups, but you can maybe do leg-assisted pull-ups, right? Where you're still going through that fully vertical pull, but you're giving yourself a chance to take a little bit of the load off, and you can control that load with your legs, okay? So we don't want to completely avoid the injured or the troublesome joint, but we also don't want to piss it off more in the moment. So the other thing you want to really be mindful of is making sure that if you are experiencing a bout of irritation, that you move slowly enough and under enough control that you don't slip into ranges of motion or you don't slip into volume in training that you can't control and that you can't recover from. So I strongly suggest that if you are in pain, that we take away kipping for a little while and you take away the explosive lifts like a push press or a push jerk or a split jerk. Allow yourself to do more strict work, do more controlled work, more tempo work, work the negatives so that you stay in a range that you can control. All right. Those are modifications. Yes. All right. So how do we start treating the joint? Well, we've already assessed if you are lacking in a range, then we want to make sure that we start accessing that range. So if you do not have full shoulder flexion, but you're trying to PR your push jerk, we need to increase shoulder flexion. So we could do some banded distraction. We could do some negatives. Supinated pull-up negatives are great for increasing that range. Dumbbell pullovers are great for increasing that range. Some type of loaded negative. If you're lacking in internal or external rotation, make sure you start developing that to make it a little bit more even on both sides, because that will come into play when you're doing any of your kipping and anything, especially butterfly pull-ups, anything like that. We want to make sure that we have that comfortable and familiar range of motion that is pain-free. If you are truly lacking in the range, then we want to increase that range of motion. If you have full range of motion, then we want to increase stability. And that is what we usually tend to find within the shoulder. We don't usually tend to find that great of a limitation. What we find is a limitation in stability. We want to have strong, stable shoulders. One of the biggest things that I see in all of my CrossFitters is that they do too much too soon. They hang from the pull-up bar way too soon. They do too many kipping pull-ups too soon. They increase their volume prematurely. What you want to make sure that you have developed is integrity of that shoulder joint, okay? So if you are going to hang from the pull-up bar, develop that skill and that stability in the shoulder to be able to hang there for a significant amount of time. If you are going to be doing kipping pull-ups or stressing that end range, make sure that you build in that volume slowly, right? Don't just jump up onto the pull-up bar and start doing Murph. Make sure that you build up slowly. Maybe you do sets of 4 for 10 minutes so that you've done 40 pull-ups in 10 minutes, and then you can increase that to 6 a minute for 10 minutes. But build in the volume slowly so that your body has a chance to adapt, so that you can stay in control and that you don't run the risk of doing too much too soon and damaging the structures of the shoulder, okay? Another thing I see a lot is, and this is just recent, but a lot of people are purchasing grips. Now, I post a lot about knee sleeves and the lifting belt, but I'm going to have to start posting a lot about grips as well. If you've made it this far in the live, I commend you. If you have just now started your, foray into CrossFit, or you're just now starting to hang from the pull-up bar and you feel like your hands don't have the capability to hold on to that bar, I would challenge you to imagine what your shoulder is capable of, right? If you throw on those grips and they allow you to hang from the bar a little bit longer because maybe your hands aren't burning or you're not ripping or you're not slipping off the bar, so you've fixed the problem at your hand, but you haven't fixed the fact that your shoulder probably isn't ready either, okay? So I encourage you to lay off of the grips for a while, earn the grips, make sure that you can do a significant amount of pull-ups without them first, toes to bar, make sure that you can hang from the bar with comfort and ease first, develop that grip strength, develop that shoulder integrity and stability before just depending on the grips to help you stay on the bar. Okay, and this is my little 2-minute TED Talk on grips. I think too many beginners are using them too soon, and we're going to see a lot more shoulder injuries because of it. So if you could just lay off the grips for a little while and earn them, I think you'll be much better prepared for later on in your CrossFit career. All right, so stability. Make sure that if you do have that range of motion, we are working on stability of the joint, and you can see this with bottom-up carries. Okay, you can take the kettlebell and you can just make sure that you're in a nice, strong, stable position. Can you press and maintain that kettlebell in a nice, tight position? This will develop your wrist, elbow, and shoulder very well for overhead pressing. You can do arm bars. You can do single arm planks. You can hang from the pull-up bar and do mixed grip holds on the pull-up bars to develop that strength and that stability from the hanging position. The other thing that you can do is in strengthening, utilize the negatives. Okay, I see all too often people dropping from the pull-up bar at the top of each rep, or when they're doing kipping pull-ups, they're dropping down into the bottom of each rep. very hardly and just like not controlling it enough. Try to utilize the negatives. When you do push press, try to bring it down slow with control. This is where we can take the opportunity to develop strength and to develop positional awareness. Where are our shoulders as we're pressing, as we're doing pull-ups, okay? Take your time and start building that strength and control. Take advantage of those negatives, okay? You also want to make sure that your single arm strength from left to right is very similar. So I challenge you, put the barbell away for a little bit. If you're experiencing pain in your shoulders, start developing some single arm strength. I said the same thing for when we were talking about the hips and the back. If you have one leg that's stronger than the other, I challenge you to do more step-ups, more lunges. Stop squatting for a little while. Build up that single strength so that you minimize that imbalance, and that they start working in conjunction with each other. They start helping each other out instead of one arm doing more work than the other. And instead of being uneven and compensating, you have an even pressing pattern, you have even strength, you have an even pulling pattern, and we minimize the risk of injury and therefore decrease irritation. Okay? Single arm strength. Increase load tolerance. Make sure that you develop your volume slowly. Again, the shoulders are very at risk for injury with the amount of pressure that we put on them in CrossFit. Make sure that you don't do too much too soon. Take your time in building up intolerance. If you're experiencing a bout of pain right now, decrease the amount of volume that you're doing. That could be the simplest fix for you. Maybe you're just doing too much right now and you're not allowing enough recovery time between your bouts of exercise. Okay? I think that is it. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you would like to dive deeper into what might be going on in your body, sign up for the waitlist at the link in bio for Fix It Formula. It's going to be a $79 3-day full body assessment so that you can start just digging in there a little bit deeper to figure out what might be causing your hip pain, low back pain, shoulder pain. Okay, we're going to try to get to the root of the problem. This is something that you can do on your own over the course of 3 days. Sign up at the link in the bio for the waitlist. If you found this useful, please save it, share it, tell all your friends. I'm here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions, please reach out. I can't help if you don't let me know what's going on. All right, I will see you next time, and thank you for watching.